A good plot twist can elevate a story. A terrible one can ruin it. These movies and TV shows tried to get clever and suffered the consequences of plot twists no one liked.
Lost told fascinating stories about the various passengers of Oceanic Flight 815 as they fought to stay alive after crash landing on a tropical island. The show's calling card was its series of flashbacks to their lives before the island and flash forwards to their time after escaping the island. Then in the final season, the show flashed sideways to an entirely new place. As it turned out, the flash sideways was really a version of the afterlife where the crash survivors agreed to meet up after they died so that they could move on together to whatever comes next. Alas, this reveal didn't sit well with many fans. As one person put it on the Lost subreddit, as time went on, it became obvious the fans would not accept they were dead all along as an explanation, so they rigged it into this mess. Another user praised the ending despite recognizing its limitations, while suggesting, "I think there was a point to be made by not revealing the mysteries of the island. The point is that the mysteries of the island do not matter. The characters and their stories are what matters." Ultimately though, the biggest complaint seemed to be that the finale didn't provide answers to all of the show's many mysteries. Airing from 1982 to 1988, Saint Elsewhere was a fairly standard medical drama. That is, until the final few minutes of the last episode. That's when it was revealed that Dr. Donald Westfall wasn't a doctor at all, but rather a construction worker. He also has a nonverbal autistic son named Tommy, who stares all day at a snow globe with the building inside that turns out to be St. Eligius Hospital, where the show was ostensibly set. The implication was that he had been the one dreaming up the stories of St. Elsewhere all along.
What's he thinking about?
This proved to be a polarizing ending for an otherwise popular series. As one person put it bluntly on Reddit years later, "Great show, up ending." This twist also ushered in the idea that an incredible number of shows exist in what's called the Tommy Westfall universe, which because of crossover episodes includes everything from Cheers to Star Trek to The Walking Dead. HBO's hit fantasy series, Game of Thrones, was beloved for most of its 8-season run, but the final season proved to be a major letdown. Daenerys Targaryen going all Mad Queen in the penultimate episode, The Bells, wasn't the only annoying plot twist, but it was perhaps the most frustrating. Up until this point, Dany had always cared deeply for her people and never took out her enemies without reason. But then she snapped in mere seconds and took out her anger on the defenseless people of King's Landing. Emily St. James of Vox summed up the reaction when she explained, "This final season has done an exceptionally poor job of tracking on just what Dany is thinking and feeling, beyond what she directly tells us she's thinking and feeling. Her motivation ends up feeling more elemental than real, which may be why The Bells drags in the notion that she's simply gone mad." Essentially, if Dany's turn had played out over a longer period, then viewers may have been more willing to accept it. Veronica Mars originally aired for 3 seasons on UPN and the CW from 2004 to 2007, before coming back for a crowdfunded movie in 2014. Then the Kristen Bell starring detective series returned again for a 4th season on Hulu in 2019. This time, the story revolved around someone who sets off bombs because he hates spring breakers. He's eventually caught, but he also leaves a parting gift for Veronica in the form of a bomb in her car. Her longtime on-again, off-again boyfriend, Logan, is the one who ends up setting it off, mere minutes after he and Veronica get married. Fans were incensed, with over 10,000 signing a Change.org petition to bring Logan back, and the critical reaction wasn't much better, with CBR writing, "Veronica's life has been one tragedy after another. Taking away her longtime love just felt like piling on, and to have it happen for such nonsensical reasons was even worse."
I'm heading out of town and not sure when I'll be back.
Charisma Carpenter endured a lot during her time playing Cordelia on Angel. And surely the most notorious moment is when she sleeps with Angel's teenage son, Connor, in the season 4 episode, Apocalypse Nowish, after she tells Angel that she still loves him. It turns out that she did this because she was possessed by a demon, but the damage was already done. Cordelia helped raise Connor, making this moment all the more problematic. At the time, the show had to work around Carpenter's real-life pregnancy, so the plan was devised for Cordelia to have sex with Connor and then give birth to a full-grown daughter named Jasmine. Most Angel viewers simply couldn't stand this storyline. One fan on Reddit put it best by writing, "It doesn't fit with Cordelia's character because it wasn't Cordelia. Cordelia was the container, but the brains behind the operation belonged to Jasmine. That being said, I think it was a terrible, disgusting, misogynistic storyline, and no matter what the explanation, I wish the writers had never done it. After 6 seasons of drama on the Upper East Side, it was finally revealed in the last episode of Gossip Girl that the title blogger was none other than Dan Humphrey? That's right, the outsider from Brooklyn was somehow pulling the strings the whole time. As Marlo Stern of the Daily Beast insisted, it went against all logic and reason. Indeed, this reveal really didn't make any sense in light of how harsh Gossip Girl was towards Serena van der Woodsen, the longtime object of Dan's affection. Nevertheless, all of the characters on the show were ultimately fine with it, but fans were less forgiving. As Cosmopolitan put it in 2021, it's something people continue to get pissed off about even today, almost 10 years after the season finale aired, as the show lives on in streaming. This was clear enough when one fan argued on the Gossip Girl subreddit. People are saying, well, if not Dan, then who? But that's the thing. Gigi should not have been anyone we know, because no one would have made sense. The original version of the primetime soap opera, Dallas, was one of the highest-rated TV shows during its 14-season run that began in 1978. But then at the end of season 8, it killed off one of its most popular characters, Bobby Ewing, played by Patrick Duffy. Duffy wanted to branch out to movies, but the opportunities he anticipated on the big screen didn't materialize. So when Dallas producers reached out to him about a potential return, he was open to it. And so, at the end of season 9, Bobby was found in the shower by his wife Pam. Then in the season 10 premiere, she explained that she had just dreamed that he died, thereby retconning the entirety of season 9. Fans were understandably ticked off, the ratings declined, and even some of the actors were angry as well, as series co-star Steve Canale told People magazine in 2023. I don't want to mention them, but various cast members were pissed because their storylines were lost as a result of that, and it had a big impact. When Jane's husband Michael died in the middle of Jane the Virgin season 3, the characters and the viewers went through a natural mourning period. But when he returned at the end of season 4, alive and well, but with amnesia, it was a different story. That was partly because his personality had changed significantly. Instead of the devoted husband that Jane loved, he was now gruff and stoic and calling himself Jason.
The amnesia.
That is a key plot twist.
Jane the Virgin was beloved for its telenovela-style plotting, but this was one twist that fans couldn't get on board with, as Jess Howard of Paste argued. While the choice to bring Michael back works in strengthening Jane the Virgin's connection to the telenovela genre, the addition of this plot point weakened the show, as it's more rooted in chaos and the allure of seeing Michael back on screen than compassion and character development. Halfway through the 6th season of Gilmore Girls, diner owner Luke is thrown for a loop when he finds out that he's the father of a 12-year-old girl named April. He's also engaged to Lorelai at the time, but instead of being open and honest with her about April, he keeps her existence a secret. It's a truly bizarre storyline that ruins the magic of the show's central romance. Needless to say, fans were less than thrilled. As Samantha Graves at Collider explained, perhaps this storyline could have worked better had it been introduced earlier and been given a bit more time to be fleshed out. Instead, it felt like it was used for shock value and needless drama. Seinfeld's 2-part series finale begins much like any other episode, with George and Jerry talking about nothing in particular. However, the plot soon takes a dark turn, as Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer are arrested for violating a Good Samaritan law after watching a carjacking without intervening. The rest of the episode mostly consists of a parade of returning guest stars testifying in court about the group's selfishness. Alas, this turn of cosmic justice really didn't work for plenty of viewers. As Brett White wrote for Decider, as an episode of television, the Seinfeld finale just doesn't hang together. The finale is too big, and it's nothing like the mundane farce the show was during its best seasons. Series co-creator Larry David doubled down by essentially recreating the same ending when Curb Your Enthusiasm ended its own run in 2024.
This is how we should have ended the finale.
Oh my God, you're right. How did we not think of that?
When it debuted in April 2024, Sugar seemed like a pretty straightforward mystery series, as private investigator John Sugar looks into the disappearance of a Hollywood producer's granddaughter. But then, out of nowhere, at the end of the 6th episode, it's revealed that the title character is actually an alien. Perhaps this could have worked had the reveal happened earlier, but with only 2 episodes left in the season, There wasn't much for this change in tone to be fully fleshed out. As the AV Club concurred, Sugar makes the grave error of resorting to a ridiculous plot twist that should have been the damn plot all along. As one fan on Reddit put it, "I loved the show, but thought the twist was completely worthless. It seemed like one of those ideas that was cool when they were writing it, but then eventually needed to be edited out. It didn't add anything to the story for me and was distracting." How I Met Your Mother spent 9 seasons building up the mysterious matriarch as the ultimate romantic choice for its main character, Ted Mosby. The title makes it very clear that this is a show all about that journey, or at least that's what viewers were led to believe. That is, until the finale robbed them of that notion. The 9th and final season finally introduces the mother, a woman named Tracy, but almost as soon as she's introduced, she's just as quickly killed off, thereby compressing years of her and Ted's relationship down to just a few key moments. And then the last scene in the finale sharply pivots and turns out to be, instead, about Ted wanting to ask out his friend Robin, as one frustrated fan vented on Reddit. "We spent 9 years waiting for a reveal, and she was killed off and forgotten about in 2 minutes." By having them end with Robin and Ted, it seemed forced and made the viewer forget about the mother and latch on to Ted and Robin. Other fans were fine with the idea of the ending, but not necessarily the execution. As one put it, they could have shown Ted speaking with the mother on her deathbed. They could have shown him mourning at the funeral. They could have shown Robin and his friends consoling him. But it was all just so quickly glossed over.
There's nothing wrong with the simple romance movie, and as far as that element goes, Remember Me isn't too bad. Its leads, Robert Pattinson and Emily DeRavin, are solid enough in their roles and boast some nice chemistry. And while it may veer into cliché, the film still certainly has its charms. But all of that goes completely and inexplicably down the drain in the movie's final moments. The film has become infamous for its final act, which reveals that the entire story has been leading up to Robert Pattinson's character being in the World Trade Center on September 11th. It's a subject matter that Remember Me bungles badly, taking a horrific tragedy and using it as cheap emotional manipulation.
I mean, why aren't you riveted?
Aside from being deeply insensitive, it's also a case of blown potential, as the romantic drama is just fine without resorting to the careless and contrived finale. The biggest problem with The Village is that its twist turns into a much worse movie. Writer-director M. Night Shyamalan's last act plot twists helped launch his career, but they ended up becoming notorious to the point of parody after this one. The horror film appears to center on a small 19th century village, which has been surrounded by mysterious monsters. But it's actually revealed that the creatures don't exist. They're just the town elders in costume, trying to scare people into staying put in their safe community. That's all well and good enough until the second twist arrives to reveal the film actually takes place in the modern day. And the village elders created these monsters to keep their people protected from the woes of the outside world. With just the first twist in place, the movie might work as a solid social commentary, but the second rug pull makes the movie needlessly convoluted. Given the film's title, it's not surprising that Spectre centers on the villainous organization headed up by Ernst Blofeld, one of 007's greatest villains, or that Christoph Waltz was brought in to portray the criminal mastermind, despite some slack attempts at secrecy.
So thank you, cuckoo.
But instead of simply rebooting the iconic villain, Waltz's character is also eventually revealed to be Bond's adopted brother, making a surprise return after faking his own death. The twist is completely superfluous. The original Blofeld is a force of pure evil, and he doesn't need to be tied to Bond in any way to be effective. The revelation that Bond has a secret brother who ended up orchestrating the events in the previous Daniel Craig-led Bond films strains all credibility for his run in the franchise.
It was me, James, the author of all your pain.
Put simply, it's a twist that twists too hard. Oliver Stone's film adaptation of Savages initially seems to end like the book, with the demise of basically every character providing a sort of closure. It also fits in well with the way the storytellers want viewers to see the three main characters. They're too wild for this world, and it only makes sense for them to go out in a blaze of glory. Unfortunately, Stone tacks on a twist wherein the ending is revealed to be an elaborate fantasy playing out in the head of one character. Instead, the bad guys get arrested and the good guys get out clean, riding off into the sunset. This disjointed happy ending isn't just a cheat, it feels like a painfully safe move. When crafting a good plot twist, it's incredibly important to consider whether it upends the plausibility of the story. Unfortunately for Alexandra Aja's high tension, its Hail Mary of a twist ending, in which the killer is revealed to be a dissociative identity of the protagonist, sends plausibility down the drain. The film, up until that point, is a pretty straightforward slasher that stands out for its artful gore. So, why the needless twist? Shots filmed from the villain's point of view make little sense after the twist, and the film's opening is even more confusing when it's watched while knowing who the killer turns out to be. Speaking of misuse of dissociative identity disorder, Secret Window also stumbles in its presentation of the illness. It should be a slam dunk of a movie. Based on a Stephen King short story, it's about a writer who retreats to a cabin in the woods to craft his next book, only to be confronted by a deranged stranger named Shooter, who claims he has plagiarized one of his works.
You stole my story.
Tensions between the two escalate and eventually turn to violence. The twist is that Shooter doesn't exist and is instead a result of our lead's mental unwellness, which, conveniently, has never manifested in the movie until this moment. Sometimes this twist works, like with Fight Club and Primal Fear, but in Secret Window, it comes off as uninspired, which is ironic considering how much we hear about stories needing to stick the landing throughout.
The only thing that matters is the ending.
The first film in the Scream franchise features a twist that is revelatory for the horror genre. There are two culprits behind the film's slaughter spree, not just one.
Surprise, Sydney.
The twist is so good that it's repeated in the sequel, Scream 2, and mostly still works. For the third film, though, the filmmakers go with a new twist, and it ends up being just plain dumb. Part of the reason the first two films in the franchise enjoy such reverence is that they function as critiques of the genre. They're self-aware and skewer the typical tropes that had started to bore audiences. The problem with Scream 3's needlessly complicated reveal is that it resembles something from the films the franchise itself satirizes. The revelation that the baddie in this film is Scream protagonist Sidney's secret half-brother, and that he has effectively orchestrated the events of the entire series, is completely unbelievable. It's a jump-the-shark moment in a franchise that scoffs at cliché and closes out the original series with a whimper instead of, well, a scream. But hey, credit to Stu for trying to tie everything together and save the story. Again.
If you find yourself dealing with an unexpected backstory and a preponderance of exposition, then the sequel rules do not apply.
In the 2009 film Splice, cutting-edge geneticists Clive and Elsa are forbidden by their bosses from using human DNA in their experiments, so they decide to ignore the orders and continue their experiments in secret. In doing this, they create Dren, a near-human, multi-species hybrid. Clive and Elsa take it upon themselves to covertly raise Dren as their own daughter, and she starts maturing extremely fast, going through childhood, adolescence, and adulthood over the course of the film. The twist in Splice isn't one moment where everything suddenly goes wrong, it's more like a series of disturbing developments that culminate in a genuinely upsetting fiasco of a climax. For starters, when Dren is a newborn, Clive attempts to drown her, but it turns out that she has amphibious lungs. Elsa eventually reveals that she herself donated her own DNA to make up Dren's human half, not some anonymous donor. Once Dren reaches adulthood, she and Clive begin to have a physical relationship. Then, towards the end of the film, Dren spontaneously changes gender, becoming male, hyper-violent, and territorial. Finally, Dren kills Clive and assaults Elsa, who is forced to bludgeon Dren to death with a rock. And as if that wasn't enough, the film ends with a reveal that Elsa is pregnant with Dren's baby. At times, the script of Splice seems to exist merely to violate every possible taboo that the writer could think of, with no deep meaning or philosophy at its core. It certainly makes for a compelling film, but only because you're waiting to see what else could possibly happen. Released in 2009, Orphan tells the story of Kate and John Coleman, a couple who adopt a child named Esther from a local orphanage. At first, their new daughter seems sweet and innocent, but as time goes on, the Colemans begin to suspect that Esther might have a dark side. In its first two acts, Orphan is a fairly competent execution of the classic evil child horror story. And then it completely goes off the rails in Act 3. Throughout the film, Esther seems to have a surprising amount of knowledge of and interest in adult relationships, despite being ostensibly 9 years old. This culminates with her unsuccessfully attempting to seduce her father, which causes him and Kate to start digging into Esther's past. Kate learns the truth that Esther isn't really a child. She's a 33-year-old woman with a condition called hypoparathyroidism, which stunted her growth. She uses her childlike appearance to take advantage of people, and she's also a homicidal maniac. Many people found the plot of this film deeply offensive for multiple reasons. Some took issue with the way that it depicted hypoparathyroidism, a real-life condition that this movie grossly misrepresents. Adoption groups also denounced the film for similarly obvious reasons. The backlash was so strong that the home video release of the film even felt the need to include a pro-adoption message as a way to counteract the toxic narrative of the movie. Released in 2019, Serenity tells the story of Baker Dill, a boat captain who lives on a remote Plymouth island. He spends his days trying to hunt down and catch an elusive giant fish named Justice. Out of the blue, Dill's ex-wife Karen shows up and presents him with an offer. She tells Dill that her current husband, Frank, is abusing their son, the quiet and introverted Patrick. Frank is planning on visiting Plymouth Island soon, so Karen offers Dill $10 million in cash if he takes Frank out on a fishing trip and ensures that he never returns. So far, so good, but here comes a twist.
Plymouth Island is a game.
That's right, Plymouth Island and all of its inhabitants don't really exist. This world is actually a realistic video game that was created by and is being played by our true protagonist, Patrick. His real father died a decade earlier. Baker Dill is a fictionalized version of Patrick's dad that he's using to enact a cathartic fantasy of killing his stepfather. And then when Dill finally does decide to knock off Frank within the game, Patrick similarly works up the courage to kill Frank in the real world. While Serenity starts to fall apart after the twist, it's always fun to watch Matthew McConaughey play an offbeat character, even one who has a hard time expressing his emotions. The Force Awakens was a promising start to a new trilogy, ending with an array of tantalizing unanswered questions. Perhaps the most intriguing of all concerned the enigmatic Rey. Despite being a poor orphan from a remote planet with no Jedi training, she has inexplicably strong Force powers. Could Rey perhaps be the long-lost child of some great Jedi? The next Star Wars film, The Last Jedi, pulled the rug out from under audiences by answering the question of who Rey's parents were in the most shocking way of all, by saying they were nobodies who sold their daughter into slavery. Then The Rise of Skywalker was released. In this film, Rey learns that she is, in fact, the long-lost granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, a reveal that most found equal parts confusing and unnecessary. Some fans think that this new twist was added just to appease those who disliked the reveal in The Last Jedi, but it was so poorly executed and nonsensical that it seemed more like a cleanup job than a genuine plot point.
What a dreadful situation.
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them opens with a montage of news headlines telling us that the evil wizard Gellert Grindelwald is still at large and could be anywhere. The segment is brief but important info for the upcoming twist. Then the film proper begins. Our hero, Newt Scamander, is a magizoologist who's just arrived in New York in 1926 with a suitcase full of rare magical creatures. Scamander soon runs afoul of Percival Graves, a high-ranking official in the magical government of the United States. Graves asserts that one of Scamander's creatures is responsible for the death of a local politician, but in truth, Graves is attempting to frame Scamander to cover up his own crimes. Once Graves is exposed and defeated, Scamander discovers that Graves has magically disguised his appearance. After dispelling his magic, Scamander reveals that Percival Graves is actually, in a shockingly underwhelming twist, Gellert Grindelwald.
What are the odds of that?
To be fair, Grindelwald is an important figure in larger Harry Potter lore, but up until now within this particular story, he did not matter at all. Sure, we technically got a bit of a tease about Grindelwald at the very beginning, but he was barely mentioned throughout the rest of the film. When he finally appeared, many viewers had totally forgotten about him. While some die-hard Harry Potter fans thought this was a cool reveal, others thought it was a bit confusing, or even worse, laughable. When a dangerous patient named Rachel Solando mysteriously vanishes from a maximum security mental hospital, US Marshal Edward Teddy Daniels arrives on Shutter Island to solve the case. As he digs deeper, Teddy begins to suspect that Andrew Ladis, the man who is responsible for his wife's death, is also somewhere on the island, and he vows to find him as well. After a series of surreal visions and frightening encounters, Teddy makes a horrifying discovery. In truth, he is Andrew Ladis, a patient at this facility. He killed his own wife, and this entire investigation was an elaborate roleplay therapy staged by his doctors to give him a chance to confront his demons. The big kicker? Edward Daniels is an anagram for Andrew Ladis, and Rachel Solando is an anagram for his wife's name, Dolores Channel. When Shutter Island hit theaters, it received a lukewarm response from critics and audiences. The plot device of a man investigating a homicide only to discover that he is the killer has been done much better in other movies. Shutter Island is still a decent film, so it's hard to get too worked up over this one. But did we really need another movie where it was all in his head?
Excuse me.
In the 2018 film Upgrade, Gray Trace and his wife are attacked by mysterious assailants. Gray ends up paralyzed and his wife is killed. Shortly after, tech mogul Aaron Keane offers Gray a chance to walk again by installing a prototype AI chip named STEM into his spine. He accepts, and after the procedure, Gray finds out that not only can he walk again, he can also temporarily gain superhuman reflexes by giving control of his body to STEM. Gray then uses these abilities to get revenge on the people who attacked him through a series of thrilling and brutal action sequences. In the end, Gray discovers that his friend Keen hired the goons that attacked him, but it wasn't Keen's idea, it was STEM's. After Keen invented STEM, the AI forced him to participate in a plan to give itself a human body, which ended up being Gray's. So how does our hero win the day? Well, unfortunately, he doesn't. There's a moment where we think he's won. Gray appears in a hospital bed, alongside his still-living wife, but this is, in fact, just a fantasy world that Gray is trapped in. STEM has now taken full control of Gray's body permanently. Between the rich benefactor is evil, the AI is evil, and the happy ending is actually a dream, Upgrade has 3 fairly tired sci-fi cliches woven into its plot. Taken together, they end this almost great movie on a gratuitously bleak note.
I'm not proud of that.
With a little more restraint, Now You See Me could have easily been a fun and glamorous crime romp a la Ocean's 11 or Catch Me If You Can. The film was a globe-trotting cat-and-mouse chase between FBI investigator Dylan Rhodes and a group of Robin Hood-esque criminal magicians called the Four Horsemen. That premise alone could be more than enough for a cool heist film, but this movie just doesn't know when to quit. Layered on top of that, Rhodes discovers that the Horsemen have ties to an ancient order of wizards called the Eye, with real magical powers. But that's not all. The final twist is that although Rhodes has been attempting to catch the Horsemen, he's secretly their leader and a member of the Eye. Presumably, Rhodes' entire multi-decade FBI career was a long con so that he could serve as the group's inside man for a single heist. This idea is so inconceivably elaborate that it completely shatters the reality of the film, even more than the actual magic does. After the Marvel Cinematic Universe had been around for a few years and most of the big characters were introduced, it paved the way for less mainstream heroes and villains to finally come to the big screen. In the case of Iron Man 3, that meant bringing longtime Iron Man antagonist the Mandarin, arguably his primary arch-enemy in the comics, to the MCU.
You know who I am. You don't know where I am. And you'll never see me coming.
The announcement that the Mandarin was to be played by Ben Kingsley only further fanned the flames of fan excitement for the character's live-action debut. And then came the twist.
Well, I wouldn't go in there for 20 minutes.
Yup, Kingsley wasn't the Mandarin. Instead, he was playing a bumbling, down-on-his-luck actor named Trevor Slattery, who was only portraying the Mandarin while the, quote, real Mandarin, Aldrich Killian, was the one pulling the strings. Slightly disappointing. The MCU has had Trevor Slattery pop up again in various movies and TV shows in an attempt to redeem him, and it has kind of worked, while the true Mandarin got redemption with Tony Leung's outstanding performance in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. The original Oldboy was a 2003 action thriller masterpiece from South Korean filmmaker Park Chan-wook. It also ends with a succession of plot twists that feels like one gut punch after another, until you're left reeling by the time the end credits roll. When it was announced that Spike Lee would be doing an American remake of Oldboy, one of the first things that fans of the original movie wondered was how the plot twist would be handled. After all, they deal with not one but 2 different examples of incest, one involving siblings and one involving a father and his daughter. On one hand, it's refreshing that the Oldboy remake didn't sanitize the twists, as they're integral to the plot of the movie and the way everything is resolved. On the other hand, the decision to take the twist even further just cheapened the whole thing. While the original revealed that the main antagonist had had a sexual relationship with his sister, the remake's antagonist not only had the same relationship with his sister, but both siblings also had it with their father. There's a delicate balance with this type of thing, and bringing the twist to that next level completely shattered that balance and made it shocking just for the sake of being shocking, a feeling the original didn't elicit. For a movie franchise that is heavily built around the bitter rivalry between vampires and werewolves, the Twilight Saga is relatively tame throughout. When there is a battle or a love scene, it stays very much within the confines of PG-13 and keeps its largely teenage girl audience in mind. That is until the shockingly violent battle that occurs near the end of the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 2. Necks are snapped, limbs are removed, multiple heads are torn clean off their bodies, several main characters are slaughtered. It's one shocking moment after another in a surprisingly gruesome battle that goes on for close to 10 minutes. Readers of the books were especially shaken, as that fight doesn't happen in the original novels, but apparently it doesn't happen in the movie either. At the end of the fight, it's revealed that it was all just a vision.
Now you know. That's your future. unless you decide on another course.
As loud as the gasps were during the fight, the collective groan after the twist put the gasps to shame. Sure, it was still entertaining to watch as it was happening, but few storytelling tropes are more tired than the "it was all a dream" cop-out.
You killed my father!
No, Buzz. I am your father.
Parodying the Luke and Vader moment has been done to death at this point, and was already a bit tired even by 1999 when Toy Story 2 was released. Even so, Emperor Zurg revealing to Buzz Lightyear that he is Buzz's father near the end of that movie was a well-executed joke that leads into the even funnier scene of Buzz and Zurg making up for lost bonding time by playing catch together. While 2022's Lightyear is meant to be a movie that Andy watched within the Toy Story universe, rather than a series of events that actually takes place in the Toy Story universe, the conceit is that it still serves as the official origin of the Buzz Lightyear character. So everything that happens in Lightyear should arguably still be accurate to the in-universe canon of Buzz Lightyear, which makes the film's twist that Zurg is actually Buzz from the future all the more baffling. Why would the toys in Toy Story 2 that were based on that movie have a completely different backstory? You know what's even more disappointing? Originally, Zurg actually was meant to be Buzz's father in Lightyear, and his real name was Larry. Now that would have been a twist. In Ocean's 11, Julia Roberts plays Tess, ex-wife of Danny Ocean, and the woman whose affection Danny attempts to win back by robbing an entire casino. In the follow-up, Ocean's 12, it is revealed that Julia Roberts herself actually exists within the universe of the movies. And wouldn't you know it, Tess happens to look an awful lot like Julia Roberts, a fact which is exploited as part of the heist driving the film. Writer George Nolfi and director Steven Soderbergh no doubt thought they were being very clever by having Roberts play both Tess and herself in Ocean's 12. But it just ends up feeling like Soderbergh's love for being able to gather A-list celebrities.
No, it's Julia.
Who's
this?
It's Julia. I'm with Bruce Willis.
You're with Bruce right now.
Thankfully, we don't ever see Tess and Roberts in the same place, although they do talk to each other on the phone, which is more than enough. The Rotten Tomatoes consensus for Ocean's 12 calls it self-satisfied and illogical, and much of that certainly stems from hanging so much of this impressively star-studded movie on Julia Roberts playing two characters, one of which is herself. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull got a lot of grief for a lot of reasons. There's the whole nuking the fridge thing, of course, which is a phrase that could easily replace jumping the shark to describe the moment that a franchise takes a turn for the worst. And then there's the twist at the end that aliens were behind the whole thing. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas justified having aliens be the crux of Crystal Skull because pop culture was all about UFOs in the 1950s when the movie was set. And that's fine. It's also fine that there is a fair bit of magical realism in the movie, and that's always been part of the franchise. The third movie ended with Indy finding the actual functioning Holy Grail after all.
You have chosen wisely.
No, where things go too far in the finale of Crystal Skull is in actually showing not only the aliens, but a UFO rising up from the ruins and zooming off. Beyond the special effects being strangely lackluster for a Spielberg-Lucas production, there's just something to be said for telling and not showing when it comes to that type of thing.
You chose poorly.
These days, it's not at all unusual for a superhero movie or TV show to address the question of what would happen if a superhero was also kind of a jerk. But when Hancock was released in 2008, it felt like a novel conceit to build a movie around.
What, you want, a cookie? Down on my face.
Tom?
And that aspect of Hancock works wonderfully, helped along by the character being portrayed by Will Smith, who is clearly enjoying the chance to play against type. Also effective is the first big twist of the movie, in which it's revealed that Charlize Theron's character also secretly has powers comparable to Hancock's. But then everything falls apart when the movie decides one twist wasn't enough and tacks on a second one to try to explain everything. The two lead characters are actually 3,000-year-old immortal beings who are the last of their kind, but also can't help but fall in love, but then lose their powers whenever they do.
Gods, angels. Different cultures call us by different names. Now all of a sudden it's superhero.
It probably sounds fine on paper, but it really does feel like part of an entirely different movie that was grafted on and ruins what was otherwise a fun, unique twist on the superhero movie genre. When discussing movies with bad endings, movies with twists gone awry, or any other examples of a movie ending on a laughably terrible note, it's impossible not to bring up Tim Burton's 2001 remake of Planet of the Apes. While Burton's film output has been wildly inconsistent for many years now, his name was still considered an automatic mark of quality when Planet of the Apes was released. Afterwards, not as much. The one thing that the movie did decently is that it was pretty good at marrying what were then cutting-edge visuals and makeup effects with the same cheesy B-movie spirit of the original Ape films. But whatever affection anyone might have mustered for the movie completely went out the window with a twist ending that tried to subvert the original's "it was Earth all along" reveal, but fell on its face in the process. That is, if you can even fully decipher it. There's something about another planet and time travel and changing Earth's history, but it's all a ridiculous mess, capped off by an image that wants to be powerful but ends up one of the most nonsensical in the history of film. The Lincoln Memorial not with Abe Lincoln, but Ape Lincoln. Oof.